Dan Rubenstein, the first round of the college football playoff is now officially in the books. We have our four winners. They are Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, and just a few moments ago, the Ohio State Buckeyes winning in resounding fashion over the Tennessee Volunteers. Hello, Verballerhood. I am Ty. He is Dan. We are the Solid Verbal. And on today's episode, we are reacting to the first round of the college football playoff, Dan Rubenstein, the expanded version of the college football playoff. A lot of takes out there this weekend. I got to be honest with you.
It's been fun.
Anybody with a take, they're firing them off. There's been a big take quick going on all weekend long. It's been fun to be part of the online discourse. We had 2 live streams. We had one on Friday night for Notre Dame, Indiana. We just got done doing a second. Voice is a little bit raspy.
It's okay.
Ohio State against Tennessee. So thought we'd take some time here on today's episode to just go through each of the games individually, unpack thoughts maybe that we haven't had a chance to unpack. You and I have talked a lot over the last 48 hours.
I don't know. The thoughts and takes and opinions and observations, I'm drained, Ty. I'm in that like post-thought clarity situation right now. Yeah.
I'm a little worried our thoughts are just going to like meld together and become one, and we're going to lose track of whose was whose.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, yeah, there's a lot to discuss here with just 4 games. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe if you are ever so inclined. Don't forget, you can go on out to playbowlbingo.com if you missed the first version of the game that we put out there, which locked on Friday. There's going to be a new bingo card opening up on Monday for the week of games that I guess starts up on the 28th. So play the game. We had a ton of entries, more entries than we've ever had in anything before.
Yes.
So we're excited about that. People are pretty jazzed up to be part of the game. We would encourage you all to go out to playbowlbingo.com again and be part of the action, Dan Rubenstein.
It's great.
Why don't we start big picture? Okay. Not so much specific to any of these games, but just, I guess, thinking more broadly about what we saw in round 1 of the playoff. There weren't a lot of good games. There weren't any good games. There were games that were good for a moment or two that had individual moments of brilliance that I think we'll probably highlight as we go through all these games, maybe over the next 40, 45 minutes or so. But bigger picture, what stands out to you based on what you saw over the last 2 days?
I mean, we had a Jim Cantori weekend of college football. The big winner is experts on low pressure systems, people who sell REI gear and beanies and are identifying whether or not a player has experience in cold weather. Big winners, people clearing a field of snow, a turf of snow, bleachers of snow. That seemed to be, we talked about this. We had the foresight. Maybe we just stumbled into it. They're like, are we going to have like a bunch of like 16-degree games? Because we had games in State College, PA, Columbus, Ohio, South Bend, and then of course we went down to Austin. So 3 of the 4 were bone-chillingly cold, it seemed, conditions. Big picture, it's not fun for me to have no contest type results that we're not seeing. I mean, Clemson made it a little bit interesting when they made it 31-24 against Texas.
Sure. Yep.
But outside of that stretch in that game, it was clear in each of the games. They're like, oh, this team is not of the level of that team.
Right.
And I like drama. I like looking at a coach's decision in a big moment, be like, ooh, I wonder why they were thinking that. Or lead changes or big halftime swings where it's like, oh, now they're coming out and doing tempo. Oh, now they're coming out and playing with the edges. Oh, now they're coming out and bombing it deep. And we got none of that really, except for Clemson putting offenses together in the sort of third quarter of that Texas game. And I'm not going to say it was a bummer because I love the novelty of where we are in this sport right now, but I found myself missing some back and forth action. Definitely.
The games could have been better. I mean, we had 4 games that in reality weren't all that close.
Right.
There was a moment in the Texas game. You're right. There were moments, I think, throughout that we could point to that at least gave us reason to be more interested in things other than the scoreboard, because truly there were some runaway trains here that we can discuss. For me, as kind of like the resident 12-team apologist, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole now. Maybe later on if we've got the energy for it. I wasn't too put off by this. Generally, this is what happens in the first rounds of playoffs.
Yeah, NBA, NFL, MLB. Yeah, you're going to get weird swings. Yeah,
you're going to get weird swings, and frankly, we've had blowouts for the last decade with the old system. So I'm not like none of us at this point should be any great stranger to what we saw transpire. It is a little bit of a bummer. You want there to be high drama games that have a lot riding on them. The stakes being you win, you move on, you lose, you go home. That you want those games to be close. Maybe the next round will bring us some of that. We can maybe give some insight as to what those matchups look like in advance of our own preview, which will drop a little bit later this week. Which game do you want to start with, though? When you think of this college football playoff, which is the game that you think has the biggest storylines attached to it?
I think Montana State's now 15-0. Might as well start there.
FBS. Okay. I should have specified.
Let's start with Notre Dame. It was the first game of the 12-team era. Let's go there.
First game of the 12-team era. We did the stream. It was Friday night. It was friggin' cold. It was a very cool atmosphere for a game. I don't know if you felt this way on Friday. And again, maybe it's just because I am the 12-team apologist, but we do monitor online discourse very closely. It is part of the business here. And there was, I would say, genuinely a feel of it being some sort of college football holiday on Friday. A lot of people were excited for this game, even if you don't like Notre Dame or don't give a damn about Indiana. It felt to me like there was palpable excitement here. And that was cool. That was cool. I would say that the final score in this game, 27-17, to me felt like a bit misleading.
I agree.
We watched this game the full way through. Excuse me. We talked about it the full way through. This was 20-13 until garbage time.
20-3 until garbage
20-3 until garbage time. Excuse me.
Yeah.
20-3 until garbage time. And that's when Indiana got some points, when Indiana kicked a beautiful onside kick.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Almost did it twice in this game. But Notre Dame's defense was just the dominating presence here. I think the biggest takeaway is that their defense absolutely proved that it was the best unit on the field. Indiana was not able to get much going with respect to a downfield passing threat in terms of any explosive chunk running plays. It just seemed like whatever they wanted to do, Notre Dame was a little bit better, a little bit stronger, and a little bit faster. Notre Dame had some big plays on the ground, right? Notably, the Jeremiah Love 98-yard touchdown run that happened earlier on in the first quarter after there was like a trading of interceptions and some weirdness to start the game. We saw that side of Notre Dame's offense, but as we discussed with Jeff Schwartz, who was on stream with us, Jeff pointed out, looking at the matchup, he's like, Notre Dame's not going to do anything anywhere close to risky in the second half. They're not going to throw the ball.
Right.
They're going to go into a shell. They're going to play super conservative because they know they can win doing that and they don't have to risk anything. And that's pretty much exactly what happened in this game. Again, 27-17 was your final here.
Yeah, when the defense is going to spot you what Notre Dame's defense was giving its offense and what Jeremiah Love was able to immediately it started out sort of sloppy. Indiana has an interception. Notre Dame has an interception. Notre Dame's backed up after their interception, and Jeremiah Love runs basically the length of the field for a touchdown. Yeah. It was very clear that even with Indiana moving the ball a little bit early, when that slowed down, that there wasn't going to be an out pitch, that there wasn't a second pitch or a third pitch for Indiana against this Notre Dame defense. And one of the things we talked about as it was happening, which was like, Indiana's not finding 6 yards on first down ever. They're not getting themselves to second and third and manageable. They're finding themselves 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 repeatedly. And, it's just not going to work against Notre Dame. Maybe it worked against earlier teams on this schedule. Certainly didn't work against Ohio State. Indiana held up against the Notre Dame pass rush much better than they did against Ohio State's. But even still, the receivers weren't getting separation. Everything was difficult. Everything was tedious. And, there's echoes of that in the Tennessee-Ohio State game as well. But even early on in a game, when it seems like, they're only down 14-0, they're only down 10-3, if everything is difficult, it's not a great sign. And so that game probably felt like it was 7.5 quarters to Indiana fans because they would have opportunities here and there, but they weren't stringing together anything against this Notre Dame defense. And Notre Dame is one of those teams, and we talk about like, this team, if you can get up, 14-3, they just can't come back. Or, hey, if this team can get up, it's really difficult to come back against them. Notre Dame's a really tough team to come back against if their pickleball is successful.
Yeah.
And it absolutely was. Obviously, the Jeremiah Love run was not pickleball, very much not. But it was Notre Dame finding themselves in 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, and that's delicious if you're an Irish fan. Yeah.
7 of 13 on 3rd downs for Notre Dame. More to the point that I made in the preview, I was pretty keen on Notre Dame trying to rush for more than 5 a carry. They got to 5.5 a carry.
Yeah.
And I think it showed. I mean, we're going to talk about it with Texas in a little bit. I also called out, can Texas build a ground game? They built a ground game to great effect.
Yes.
In that game against Clemson. We'll get there in due course over the next, half hour or so. But I like what Notre Dame did on the ground. It was not a tour de force through the air. That's fine.
No.
Again, I've stopped really trying to define this offense in any specific way because it's a lot of Riley Leonard doing what Riley Leonard is good at. But when they are able to run the football, they kind of defer to that first.
Yeah.
And don't try to put it on Riley Leonard wherever possible. So I think this was a fine game plan. It worked for me. The only thing that I would call out, and this is maybe a means of projecting forward now as we get to this Georgia matchup, Riley Leonard took a lot of hits.
Yes.
In this game. And particularly the interior line of Notre Dame seemed to have trouble with Indiana's front. And I just kept thinking to myself, if this is the case against Indiana, what's going to happen against Georgia? Right? Georgia is many things, some of them flawed this season, but they're still pretty damn good. They may be playing with a backup quarterback, but the backup quarterback's not going to be playing defensive line, okay?
No.
We have seen this defensive line overwhelm teams like Texas back in the month of October.
Yep.
I don't know if we see a redux of that. I sure hope not as a Notre Dame fan. But that to me is something that is really concerning. Really concerning seeing what happened. Can they do things like move Riley Leonard? Can they use him in a different capacity than what we saw on Friday night? Absolutely, I think we will. I think there was a moment in this game where Notre Dame just stopped trying to show anything and was just trying to get it over with because it was cold.
Agree.
Truly. So the game plan could look drastically different in 10 days or so whenever they play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. But that to me is something that I think I need to give a little bit more attention to when we drop our preview later this week.
And to be fair, a team that has not had a successful downfield quarterback threat in Georgia Tech game planned really well for this Georgia defense. This Georgia defense is not the capital G, capital D
it's different.
Georgia defense.
It is not the same. It is not the same. But I'm telling you, I have that vision in my head of what they did to Texas when they went to Austin earlier in the year. And that frightens the hell out of me, knowing that Notre Dame just still has some questions along that line.
I agree. Okay, fair enough. Any other stray thoughts about where Notre Dame is right now? All things considered, it's a very good place. Indiana, that was 27-17, the final. The 2 touchdowns came very late in this one, and 20-3, 27-3 was the actual overwhelming rhythm of this game, where it felt like Indiana couldn't do much.
Yeah.
And we talked about this as it was happening. The punt call at midfield, Indiana hadn't been doing anything on offense, and Curt Cignetti referenced that when explaining why he punted. But they're down 20-3 with 11 minutes in the game. It's a 3-possession game. They need 3 scores and 2 stops in 11 minutes, and he punted in a playoff game on the road where you're just like, this is when it's going to happen. Yeah. If it's going to happen for you, Indiana, it's got to start right now. And he punted. And so that was pretty disappointing to me. The play calling didn't seem great in higher leverage moments, as few of them as there were for Indiana. And Notre Dame, just better coach, better players, better outcome.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the play calling was a function of the Notre Dame defense or if it was just a bad game plan. It felt like a bad game plan. It felt like the game plan was bad even before the Notre Dame defense asserted itself. And to your point, for all the bravado, all the tough talk from Curt Cignetti, who I love and has done wonders at Indiana, and I hope he continues doing wonders at Indiana. For all of that, though, this was a very timid game plan. This was a lot of runs when they should have thrown. This was punts when seemingly they should have gone for it. This was field goals when they should have gone. Like, this was not what I think I expected coming into this game. I thought they would play with reckless abandon, and instead they kind of went in a shell.
Yeah.
That part was a little bit disappointing. I was hoping for more. I still think a great story for Indiana. As you said last night, Indiana fans probably don't want to hear that until March, right? It's still a tough loss to get bounced out of the playoffs. I respect that. But to go from 3-9 to 11-1, now 11-2,
yeah,
to have the kind of season they did, to have now all this momentum on the program. Sure, you want to win the playoff game, but that in and of itself is like a bigger deal that probably outlives this playoff stint.
Yeah, like we said before, hope they're able to build on this in terms of the roster, in terms of the assistants, in terms of what they are looking to do moving forward as a program, because any conference adding quality depth is a positive thing.
Notre Dame next plays Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That's at 8:45 on New Year's Day. Currently, Eastern time. Currently, they are a 1.5-point dog against the Georgia Bulldogs. We will come back to that. We're actually going to be dropping our next public episode, which will be our quarterfinal preview on December the 27th, which is a rare Friday drop for us. We never do Fridays, but that's when the next episode is going to come out to get you ready for the quarterfinals. Yeah.
It's because it's Tuesday, Wednesday, right? The Fiesta Bowl, then the next three are Tuesday, Wednesday, a week from this coming Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't want to go to Ohio State, Tennessee first, because
let's do it.
When I think storylines, I think the biggest storyline is what Ohio State did to Tennessee. And you can even take Tennessee out of it if you want to and say the biggest storyline is what Ohio State did to itself, or how it rectified itself in the shadow of that loss to Michigan a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
Lost 13-10 to Michigan. This week went out and put up 42 on Tennessee, just as everybody predicted, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a different game plan, talk about a different vibe, talk about a different everything. Ohio State finally decided to drive the $20 million Lamborghini at 190 miles an hour. Yeah. And guess what? It was really freaking fun. They were really freaking good at it.
Yeah.
42-17 was your final. They win at home in resounding fashion, improbable fashion, I would say, over the Tennessee Volunteers. Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely felt like, well, there's your problem right there. Don't put ecto cooler in your gas tank.
Right.
Yeah. Trust your quarterback. Trust your offensive line to protect the quarterback, as beat up and different as it looks now than it looked a few weeks ago. Trust your receivers, trust all these pass catchers, trust that your running backs can make plays either carrying the ball or catching the ball, and go from there. Tennessee has an excellent defense. Tennessee has an excellent front. But all things considered, this was not a like Ohio State forgetting how to play football issue against Michigan. It was Ohio State, especially the coaching staff, seemingly in their own head about trying to prove something very specific against Michigan to break that streak. It's a dumb way of thinking. It needs to be like a nameless, faceless thing somehow, because obviously whatever they were doing behind the scenes didn't work for that game. And to come out like they did, throwing the ball downfield, and not even just throwing the ball downfield. It was Jeremiah Smith motioning across the formation on first down and picking up an easy 8 that you get to 2nd and 2. Tennessee would have loved to have 2nd and 2s tonight. They did not have that all that often. And so the combination of fearlessness on offense and confidence in what they should have confidence on offense, and then the defense locking down whatever Tennessee was trying on offense and swarming Nico, who honestly, to his credit, was able to pick up, after an awful first quarter, positive yardage on the ground, made some plays, drove this team down the field occasionally.
Yeah.
Got them to 21-10, where it felt like, oh, stop and score, and we have something interesting here. But that requires the score part, and that was the most difficult thing. And Dylan Sampson going down early on in this one, that's a pretty big deal. He was one of the best offensive players in the SEC. He didn't look the same. I don't know if we have like a specific injury situation.
I saw left hamstring.
Left hammy. Been there. Doesn't feel pleasant, and definitely can't feel pleasant running with a bad left hamstring into JT Tuamalu's torso. So it changed the calculus of what Tennessee was or wasn't able to do. Tennessee, with time to prepare for Ohio State, with all the tape in the world, with 12 games of tape, basically accomplished 1.4% of what they would have liked to do. And that's Ohio State had an answer for everything. They had a body everywhere. They had the weird red pajamas everywhere on this field.
We brought up a question on the stream. And yes, I'm going to go here a little bit.
Okay.
How much of this was Ohio State being excellent versus Tennessee maybe being something other than what many of the SEC apologists out there had tried to sell us this past week?
See, I don't even remember hearing Tennessee chatter. It was all about who wasn't in there.
I heard a lot of Tennessee chatter.
All right. You're probably on social media more than I am at these days.
I heard a lot of Tennessee chatter, and I think it's fair to ask the question after they lose by 25 points.
Yeah.
In a stadium that supposedly had 30,000 of their own fans.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not fair to ask if Tennessee was overrated all along?
Oh, it's fair to ask it, especially the manner in which they lost to Arkansas.
I like this team. I like Tennessee.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily even making that. I'm not even necessarily making that argument on my own.
Right.
But I think it's a fair question to ask. Maybe I'm getting out ahead of some of what we're going to see on social media tomorrow. But,
sure.
This was not a big play offense. It wasn't. It may have a reputation for that, given what we have seen in previous iterations. It wasn't that this year.
No.
They were not ripping off huge plays. This was an offense that was driven by Dylan Sampson. They were not throwing the ball 50 yards down the field at a pop.
No.
At times they were trying, but it just never materialized. I think Nico in this game acquitted himself pretty well. He didn't necessarily have the numbers to back it up. There's only so much you can do against a defense like Ohio State. There wasn't a whole lot of support for him. They were in his face. He ran the ball well. There was a lot to like, I think, just in terms of his development here. Totally separate from the stats. He, I think, handled his business about as well as he could have, all things considered. There just was no shot because the Tennessee defense got torched. They got torched. The reason that Nico threw the ball 31 times and ended up running it 20 times is because Dylan Sampson went down and because they got in such a hole early against Ohio State. Again, it was 21-0 end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
They simply had no choice but to build the entire plane out of him. So to his credit, I think he did about as well as he could have. I'm sure he would like to do better, but didn't make the big mistake. He did not kill this Tennessee team.
He was more successful throwing his body downfield than the ball. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know. I'm curious to hear what the Verballerhood has to say about this Tennessee thing because it's been a hot topic with how many teams got in from the SEC. I don't want to relitigate that now. I do want to talk through these games. We've got 2 more to go after this one.
Probably too many got in, right?
I'm not going to go there, okay? Not on this episode. We'll come to it at some other point in time.
No. The fact of the matter is...
I'm just saying, this is where that conversation is going to go next.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an unfair question to ask in light of what we saw tonight against Ohio State.
I agree. I mean, this is not intended to be snarky. It might come off as that way. I sometimes have that effect on my language. Tennessee was not prepared for the speed and athleticism of the Big Ten's third place team.
Right.
And everybody in the country, everybody in the universe wanted Jeremiah Smith. He is not a Big Ten player. He is just a player. But Tennessee had no answer. That secondary was running for their lives, hoping that a ball would bounce off of the back of their helmet as they ran after Jeremiah Smith and Ohio State receivers. There was no time to turn around and make a play on the ball because they got torched all the time.
If this game were closer, if the Tennessee pass rush had more of an effect on Will Howard, who, by the way, I don't know if we've mentioned his name at all. Will Howard may have played the best game I've seen him play in 3 years.
Oh, incredible performance from Will Howard.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just making the right decisions. It was ball placement. It was confidence. It was staying in rhythm. Some of the passes he threw to Jeremiah Smith, the second touchdown in particular, I think it was a 22-yarder. Talk about throwing that one in the bucket, man. I mean, just perfect. Absolutely perfect. He was awesome in this game. Only missed 5 passes. Jeremiah Smith, I think, the star out wide, but also a really good game for Emeka Egbuka. Trey Henderson, they got him involved both in the running game and in the passing game. We saw Quinshon Judkins with 2 touchdowns as well. It was just a total offensive effort from Ohio State. If you are an Ohio State fan, you are thrilled. You are wondering, where was this against Michigan? You are wondering what's going to happen now, round 2 against Oregon. By the way, they're a 1-point favorite.
Going to the West Coast, take on the Ducks.
Going to the West Coast. More of a traditional, I guess, Rose Bowl matchup, right? A former
Pac-12
school
Big Ten.
against a traditional Big Ten power. It's going to be 5 p.m. traditional start time for the Rose Bowl, New Year's Day, Ohio State, Oregon, the Buckeyes. At present, look about a 1-point favorite. I would be surprised if that does not grow. I had that one projected at Ohio State -3. I think that number is going to go up a little bit, but been wrong many times before.
Yeah, we have what? Pac-12, Big 12, ASU, Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got all sorts of classic. You got Georgia, Notre Dame. Was that
Yep.
Jake Fromm? Was that like the beginning of the Jake Fromm era when Jake Eason was hurt? Jacob Eason?
Yep.
And that was in South Bend, I want to say.
Yep.
So, yeah, you got Boise, Penn State. I don't know if I have any connective tissue in the moment with that. I'll think about it. But, yeah, where do you want to go?
Very quickly,
yeah,
in like 20 seconds or less.
Sure.
As an Oregon fan, knowing that you had the winner of this game, now having seen what you saw from Ohio State put up 42 points on what we think is a very good Tennessee defense still, even in light of this, are you more worried? Are you what are your thoughts now in reaction to what you saw tonight?
First of all, I'd like to pat myself on the back for when asked before, who would you rather have, Ohio State or Tennessee? And I laughed and said Tennessee because, of course, why would you want Ohio State and even risk getting the good version of Ohio State? Yeah. What's your question? What are my initial thoughts about Oregon, Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, how are you react? You, somebody who notably a couple weeks ago said, "Oh, I think actually, Oregon may have the easiest path in." Now you've got Ohio State.
No, I corrected myself.
Be careful what you wish for.
Sure. I said that their path isn't as immediate killer as people thought, saying that they have the worst matchup in either round 2 or whatever, because they could potentially get Ohio State or Tennessee, I guess was part of that conversation as the 8-9 game. My thinking was that if Oregon's goal is to win a national championship, it almost behooves them to get the toughest team as early as possible when they are the most rested and have a rest advantage, because you're going to have to go through 3 teams. And so in this situation, you'd get a Texas team with Quinn Ewers still hobbling and not separating themselves all the time from decent teams. And then Notre Dame that can't really throw downfield, but still obviously excellent. A Penn State team that you just know you can beat. You have the confidence that you can beat them. And perhaps a Georgia team that isn't starting their starting quarterback. And so if you are going to say, okay, the best of the field is the best of Ohio State, the time to get them is in the Rose Bowl on the West Coast with the rest advantage.
Okay.
That's all. That was my point, that it was not an automatic killer thing. Doesn't mean they're going to win the game. It just means timing wise, I don't hate as an Oregon human seeing Ohio State here.
Okay.
That's all. But yeah, my immediate reaction to this game is it should be a banger. I hope Oregon has a whole bunch of answers to confuse Will Howard and limit Jeremiah Smith. You don't stop Jeremiah Smith, but limit Jeremiah Smith. And hope it's a great game.
He's so good. He's so good.
We should have more competitive games in 10 days or whatever.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Let's go to the Texas Clemson game, Dan. This was the 4 p.m. start.
Yes.
On Saturday. Texas wins by a 38-24 score. This game was interesting. Clemson tried to mount a comeback. They were down. They tried to mount a comeback. They tried to do it on the arm of Cade Klubnik, who I thought was sensational in this game. If I'm going to talk about Will Howard looking the best I've seen of him in 3 years, this may have been the best I've seen Cade Klubnik look in a long time. I can't really put a number on it. I thought he was really good. I thought he was playing to try and spite Texas, who, if you listen to the commentary, you'll know grew up 10 minutes away from the stadium. They could not resist themselves. They pointed that fact out about 1 million times.
Yeah, Cade Klubnik's new last name is a hyphen. It's Cade Klubnik dash grew up in the shadow of DKR. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So suffice to say, for me, the club level was open. Tickets were available. They were getting pricier in the second half. He was, able to bring Clemson to some extent back in this football game. But ultimately, the reason that Texas was able to maintain some cushion, ultimately get the 2-score win, cover the point spread, if you're into those things, is because they ran for 292 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And this is something, not to pat myself too much on the back, but this was something that I called out specifically in our preview. Because You can run on Clemson. We saw that in games previously against like Louisville, some big runs that were ripped off against Clemson.
Rashard Smith ran pretty well in the ACC championship game. Yeah.
They were giving up big plays on the ground. It's been a recurring trend. Their yards after contact number was horrible, like 119th or 20th in the nation. And on top of it, they're just, per the people that keep track of tackling stats, not a great tackling team. And so my theory, and it has been one of the things all season long that has, I think, held true and actually has been quite predictive. If you're going up against a team that can run, if you're not a team that particularly defends the run well, and if on top of it, your tackling stats aren't good, those things compound. It's really tough to beat that team. And that is what happened here. Texas had a tour de force on the ground. They looked awesome on the ground. Jaden Blue had a really good game. Kudos to him. It was not about Quinn Ewers. It was not about anything other, in my eyes, than the Texas ground game asserting its dominance, controlling the clock, giving Texas the padding that it needed. I just felt like the Clemson defense could not get off the field because of that Texas ground assault.
I agree. Look, that was the difference. Clemson couldn't stay on the field for stretches in this game on third down. And for as many plays as Cade Klubnik, it was him and TJ Moore had the nice connection. It just wasn't enough. That Texas had more ways to win this game. And even though Quinn Ewers wasn't going downfield a ton to his receivers, made enough plays downfield. I think Gunnar Helm ended up leading Texas in receiving. And you're right. It's the ground. It was coming into this game talking about Texas struggling in the red zone, turning 7s into 3s, kept those 7s as 7 against Clemson today. And when it did get close, Texas found that gear once again, especially on defense. And another one of those teams that the speed of this Texas defense is something to marvel at. Even though Clemson does not look like, top 6, 8, 10 team in the country, still guys on this team. And they were struggling at times to find grass. And that's a credit to the job this Texas defense did against Clemson. And it's ground, it's red zone, it's making timely plays. It's not blinking when it got a little bit closer, because it looked at the start that Texas was going to run away with this.
It did.
And Clemson stood in there nicely and just, had the pick 6 called back. There were a couple of opportunities that they couldn't capitalize on. And that was sort of that.
One other thing that I jotted down was and we didn't talk much about this in the preview, but it's one of the numbers that jumps off the page when you look at Texas. Texas has been fairly heavily penalized this season. And in this game, I was curious to see a big moment against a team like a Clemson. Clemson's been there before under Dabo Swinney. I just wanted to watch penalty yardage. 2 penalties, 10 yards for Texas. Highly disciplined in this game. They stuck to their game plan, finished with close to 500 total yards, a lot on the ground. As I said, 292. That to me was the difference. So now they've got Arizona State.
Yes.
Also a 13.5-point favorite going into that Peach Bowl game against the Sun Devils. So Texas starting things out, if you just go by the point spread, as the team thus far with the easiest pathway in. The Clemson game, they covered 13.5. Wasn't always easy, but they end up covering in the end, winning by 2 scores. Now they've got this game against Arizona State. I don't know how to handicap that game. I feel like Texas is the better team. I feel like Arizona State maybe has more momentum given the way they closed out their season. I'm curious to dig in here and try to put myself in the mind of Kenny Dillingham. Like, what is the way to attack this Texas team with the personnel on hand? And what can they do defensively if Texas is going to go out there and try and run the ball on them to keep themselves in the football game? Like, I have visions of this going a similar direction that we saw today against Clemson.
Yeah, if I'm building a victory sandwich for Arizona State over Texas, it's roasted Cam Scattaboo, smoked Cam Scattaboo, rocked Cam Scattaboo, diced Cam Scattaboo, a little bit of lettuce, cheese, and dressing on some toasted Cam Scattaboo. Yeah. I mean, it's not to the degree of Ashton Genty because Sam Levitt has been quite good, but now down his best receiver. It'll be fascinating, but you also understand why the line is what it is.
It is.
Because the roster that Texas has, not saying Arizona State can't build its roster to a dangerous point, but we're still very young in the Kenny Dillingham era. And the season is already an overwhelming success as a team getting a playoff bye coming in after being picked 16th in the conference in the preseason. But yeah, it's a nice draw right here for Texas.
I thought this was a really disciplined effort from Texas. I was encouraged by what I saw. And look, if you're a Texas fan, you're encouraged by the matchup against ASU. I think if you're an ASU fan, you're looking at this and you're saying, all right, well, we're playing with house money at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
You win the conference, you get in a first round bye. That's good. You get rested. You knew you're going to have to play teams that are perceived to be much, much better than you. My hunch is they've been game planning for Texas. They probably assumed that was going to be their opponent. Not taking too much for granted, but
no,
let's just be real about this.
They didn't know what the offensive line health was going to be. They didn't know what the Isaiah Bond health is going to be. There are variables at play here that Texas is going to need to quickly account for.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how they use Sam Leavitt in that game. He has shown that he can be highly mobile. He can run the football. They're going to need to use every last trick play that they have to beat this Texas defense because it's really freaking good. So 38-24 is your final. Again, they're playing in the Peach Bowl. That game is also on New Year's Day. I believe that's the earlier time slot. They are a 13.5-point favorite again going into that one against Arizona State.
Yes.
That brings us to the final game. This was the early one on Saturday up in State College. I had a bunch of friends up at this game. They were all
played on Hoth. Yeah.
Yeah. They were all texting me how friggin' cold it was in State College. And I can attest to it. We got snow out of nowhere here. I'm a little bit farther east of State College, but it's been real friggin' cold. Winds, wind chill, random snow. We had 3 inches of snow that just happened upon us here.
Mm-hmm.
Hoth is a pretty good way to describe what Beaver Stadium
That's the right
like.
reference, right? The Star Wars snowy frozen planet. Yeah.
Yeah. 38-10 was your final score here. Penn State wins in pretty dominating fashion, Dan.
Yes.
My initial thought in this game was that the combination of factors, be it weather, the size of the moment, the stakes, certainly the opponent, Penn State's defensive front, all of that felt too much for Kevin Jennings.
Sure.
It felt too much for him. We spent a pretty good chunk of our preview talking about how Penn State was going to contend with Kevin Jennings. And in the end, they kind of did what we discussed, which was they got pressure on him without blitzing.
They did.
They forced
much
the
like
issue.
Clemson did. Yeah.
They forced the issue. They got pressure on him without blitzing. They forced him to make a mistake. He had 3 picks in this game. He had 2 pick sixes in this game relatively early. There was a conversation with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Like, are they going to put Preston Stone in? Preston Stone in the portal.
But still with the team. Well, was with the team. Yeah.
I believe going Northwestern or so. I don't know where he's going.
That's the word. Yeah.
But still with the team. Was still there. Was wondering that early on in the game, is it time to move on? Put somebody else in this game. My hunch is that they suspected the only way they could climb back into this thing is by using the playmaking ability of Kevin Jennings. They were damned if they did and damned if they didn't with respect to keeping him in that football game. But it was, again, an instance of the Penn State defense controlling the game, controlling the point of attack, finding ways to disrupt Kevin Jennings. I don't know if it was the weather. I don't know if it was the crowd. I don't know what it was, but he was not comfortable throwing the football. He certainly was not accurate throwing the football. SMU just could not mount any kind of significant charge in this one. It was over at halftime.
It was, and it was similar to Notre Dame, given the conditions, and I would argue that they probably ended up running the ball a little bit better because Drew Aller wasn't doing much. Tyler Warren wasn't doing much. Obviously, he got his touches, and when he got it, he was typically pretty strong. I mean, you spot a team 2 pick sixes in the first quarter and a half, whenever it happened. That's tough. That's just mentally, emotionally tough, especially in that environment, especially given the weather, given everything. It just seemed Kevin Jennings knew as he was receiving the snap that his offensive line was not going to be holding up against what Penn State was sending at him, which was 4 dudes, sometimes 5. And the receivers weren't getting open. Penn State had the frozen, dormant grass on lock.
You love that. That was your favorite thing of this Saturday.
I only recently learned the term dormant grass. I know grass doesn't die in the winter, but I like the word dormant.
Quint Kesenick was all about that turf grass
Great.
management. Yeah.
It's great. SMU, good year. Not as good as Penn State. The players aren't as good as Penn State's players. Although I'll echo what I said earlier when we recap this game. I like SMU up front. Only so much they can do on defense when the offense is going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Kevin Jennings sort of running for his life and hoping somebody pops open as he's heading to the sideline. But there's players up front for SMU. I like those guys. They were handling Penn State's offensive line decently well, all things considered, at least in the first half. Yeah. Drew Aller did not get into any sort of rhythm in this game. And maybe it's, throwing into the wind, a frozen ball. You count for everything here. But yeah, he was not finding success either in the same way Kevin Jennings was not.
No, I think if it weren't for the fact that Kevin Jennings had so much trouble, we'd be talking more about the trouble that Drew Aller had.
Yeah.
In this game. But I don't know how much of that we put on Aller. I feel like I'm sort of the excuse maker for all things Drew Aller.
Right.
So I need to tread carefully here.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, just because both quarterbacks had so much trouble, if it was a weather thing, if the weather just really was affecting what they
had to have. Yeah.
It was brutal up here. I don't know if it was more brutal than it was at Ohio State or Notre Dame, but it was,
the wind seemed bad. Yeah.
I'm close enough to State College to tell you that the weather's been brutal. And
Ty Cantori here. Yeah.
I cannot imagine that did not play some factor. That being said, we're essentially in playoff and tournament mode now.
Yes, the 8-team playoff begins. The play-in round is done.
And if you've ever watched the NFL playoffs, the NBA playoffs, any tournament setting, baseball, it doesn't matter. Once you get into a tournament setting, to some degree, the normal benchmarks we have for what is good and what is bad from a stat standpoint, that goes out the window. We could throw that stuff right out the window because it's about winning, it's about surviving, it's about advancing.
It's also been about been there before. That a team has been in the conference finals. The team has been in, that's an NBA reference. I know that the conference championship is not a call to finals. That Texas has played in Bryant-Denny. Texas has played in a conference championship. Texas has played in the playoff. Oregon, same. Obviously Georgia, same. Notre Dame, same. There's the certain mentality of okay, I understand the rhythm of this environment. And it was the first time for Indiana. It was the first time for SMU. It was the first time for Tennessee on this level. So they'll get better. They'll get used to it, but it's tough to be thrown into it.
It's real tough. I'm not taking stats entirely at face value in this Penn State game.
Yeah.
Especially the team stats. If you didn't watch it, if you go back and look, those numbers are all thrown off by the fact that they had 2 pick sixes and they were able to win a lot of field position because of some of those SMU mistakes. The punting was a disaster in this game as well. It was just, the weather definitely played a factor. The mistakes, obviously,
the punting was hilarious. Yeah.
The punting was bad. Just everything about this was not a banner showing. Certainly they will feel much, much better playing in a dome on New Year's Eve against Boise State, if only because the elements won't play nearly the same effect that they did in this game that we saw against SMU.
Absolutely.
Your final was 38-10. On the SMU side, I think there's going to be a conversation that probably pops up this week about whether they belonged in this game or not. They were having that conversation online about midway through the first quarter.
Saw that.
I'm still content with SMU being there. I think SMU had a great season.
Yeah.
SMU definitely under Rhett Lashley, as I said in my preview, it's clear that they've got a really creative vision for how to play offense. They're not doing the same thing over and over again. I like the way that he is building this team. I think there's incredible optimism about where they could go next. The ACC is many things, but the ACC definitely gives SMU a shot to be competitive for a playoff spot most years.
Yep.
So I think it's all gravy for SMU. Now they have this one under their belt. We'll see if they do better the next time. But 38-10, it was a tough watch for most of the way through.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Penn State is a 10-point favorite now going into this Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve against Boise State. And this is a game that you and I talked a little bit about when we were doing our live stream. I know Ashton Ginty is out there. I know Ashton Ginty is probably going to get his stat line against Penn State or really against anybody.
Right.
I like the matchup for Penn State. It feels to me like the Boise offense is telegraphed. It feels to me like you can move the ball somewhat easily on this Boise defense.
Yes.
If you're Penn State. Okay. I get that Boise's been competitive with the likes of your Oregon Ducks. I have liked Boise State. I have rooted for Boise State to get into this. I am supportive of them getting that first round bye. I don't want to talk down what Boise State has done this season. They've had a hell of a year. I like the matchup for Penn State. I think the point spread is right. I called it out the second I looked at my spreadsheet. I had it at 10.
Yep.
It is 10. I think that's the right number. I think Penn State's got a clear edge in this game.
Yeah, the problem here for Boise State, who is a very, very good team, is 27 carries for 153 won't get it done against Penn State. That unless that 27 for 153 includes 4, 40-yard touchdown runs or whatever my math should work out to. It's just the passing game is efficient, but not crazy dangerous. And the defense seems extremely average. And the roster, while good, while impressive, is not Penn State's roster. And depth and upper level talent at every position, it matters on New Year's Eve. It just does.
Boise has given up a bunch of big plays, both on the ground and through the air as a defense. We will talk about that when we do our preview again later on this week. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with Boise, but suffice to say, we'll unpack as much of that as we can when we put the quarterfinal preview together. Again, that's going to drop to the public feed on Friday, the rare Friday drop for us, which we never do.
Yeah.
It'll be out there on the public feed this coming Friday. It'll be out there a little bit sooner, probably Thursday afternoon-ish for the folks that are listening out at verballers.com on our Patreon.
Do you think teams that play in the southern portion of the United States should be spotted 25 to 30 points if they have to travel north? Like, that just seems fair. Like, let's be cool. Like, guys, they're not used to it. And so I'm trying to look out for everybody here and figure out what the most reasonable solution would be. I'm trying to be solution oriented, Ty. And it seems like they just need that little boost, Ty.
It's like in a cross-country skiing race where they give people a little bit of a head start.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
They seemed really sad that it was so cold. And I don't know, that bums me out.
Oh, boy. We'll get comments for that one. Can't wait. Can't wait for that.
It's really hard, Ty. Come on.
It was hard. It was tough for Tennessee. Tennessee got drilled. Oh, my God.
It was probably way warmer on the Ohio State sideline. I don't know. They were able to cope. They have tips, probably.
We had that bit, I think Fowler was talking about how they brought in the extra warm electric heaters. They had sewn fleece into the pockets of Nico's uniform.
By the way, it was like 26 degrees in Knoxville tonight.
Yeah, it was cold.
The difference was not crazy. It was all overstated. And once again, to just bookend this, I love seeing people's cold weather choices. Oh, you're not going beanie? You're just going the ear covers? Okay. Yeah. You're going the full, like Nick Saban went with like the fedora or whatever that the felt type warming hat is. Great. I just, love seeing the coats, love seeing the jackets, love seeing the choices. It's great.
I'll tell you what Nick Saban didn't love seeing.
Shane Gillis?
He didn't seem to love Shane Gillis all that much.
Shane Gillis is really good. It was really, I thought he knocked it out of the park. He was great. I mean, he's like a dyed-in-the-wool Notre Damer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And said something like, you're getting a lot of parity now that it's not just the SEC teams who can pay players. And Nick Saban wasn't there for that, but it was repeated to him by the Herb Streeter McAfee. And he was like, well, we always prided ourselves doing things the right way at Alabama. Shane Gillis was just like, I thought we were having fun. I thought it was a fun show, guys. It's great. It's good TV.
Good stuff.
Second appearance this year, right? For Gillis on game day. Great.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Look, our voices are shot.
Yeah.
You're off to parts unknown for a few days. We're going to take some downtime here over the next couple days or so, get our head straight, get in the right frame of mind for this quarterfinal preview that I've teased a couple times over now is going to drop to our feed again Friday the 27th. We will talk about these 4 games. We will talk about other bowl action that has transpired just in passing. We would encourage you all to go on out to playbowlbingo.com. It is free. You're not doing anything to get in this game. We're not going to spam you. I promise. Scout's honor, not even a scout.
I might even take you out to dinner.
I'm not taking anybody out to dinner.
Grab some spicy Szechuan cooking.
No.
No?
Let's not get crazy here. If you win, maybe.
I'm not saying
maybe.
in a weird way, Ty.
I'm not saying it in a weird way either.
Get some hot pot with somebody in this game.
Here's what I am saying.
Okay.
Go to playbowlbingo.com. It is free. You go to that URL. You click on the link. You sign up for free. Then you will be notified whenever we open up a new bingo card. We've got one going on now. There's going to be another one that opens up on Monday afternoon. You're going to have a few days till the end of the week to get your picks in. You can go back and listen to our bowl preview, part 2, where we talk through some of the bets that are going to be involved as part of that bingo card. Okay?
Yes.
Very simple. It's free to play. All are welcome to join. The more, the merrier. That's my diatribe on this. Okay? We'll give out fabulous prizes. We could talk through more of what those prizes are here very, very soon. Okay?
Great.
I think that's all I need to do in terms of housekeeping. Of course, hit follow, hit subscribe. If you made it this far, we would encourage you to follow along on social media so that you don't miss any announcements, i.e. when we're going to do more live streams, because we got a couple of those coming up. You and I have yet to figure that one out exactly, but I think leaning Oregon, Ohio State, Rose Bowl.
Seems right to me. We won't be too tired because it's a 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll still have the game after. Yeah, I think that's right.
Why don't we leave it there? We've got 4 winners advancing. We will update our brackets accordingly. We'll make sure we post that out there for all to see. We hope you all enjoyed this weekend as best you could. At a minimum, kept warm wherever it is you are in this country and in this universe. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildebrand, thank you, as always, for all your undying support, for hanging with us all weekend long. We'll talk to you at the end of the week. Stay solid.
Peace.